If you like the video, please consider supporting us on Patreon.
You're wondering how to shoot an interview and get the best out of a person. Maybe you're interviewing someone for a documentary, YouTube, or for a client video. And you're concerned, well, how do you get what you need? Will I get what I need? What are the best questions to ask? What are the questions you don't ask? How do you elicit good stories out of people that feel natural and fit the story you're trying to tell? We're going to show you how. Welcome to Pull My Focus, Adventures in the World of Digital Filmmaking, where we give you the inside tips you need on how to make great video. Interviewing is a bit of an art, but once you get into it, it's actually a lot of fun. I mean, you're a person, you're interviewing a person, and probably they have great stories to tell. The trick is how to elicit those stories in a way that feels natural and that fits the project that you're making. Actors are trained to be on camera and to work under pressure. Say this, then go here, stand there, do this, and then say that, all while emoting. That's what they do. But your subject, they're not an actor, they're not trained. And more than likely, they're not used to being in front of a camera at all. They're going to be nervous. So your job is to make them as comfortable and at ease as possible in front of the camera so that they are as natural as possible. This means you need to take away as much pressure from them as possible and don't put any more on them than you already are by pointing a camera at them and asking them questions on the record. If you can, interview them in their own space, home, office, a place where they already feel comfortable. Sound checks are weird and technical. Having your subject say, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. What if it was an opportunity to have them be a little bit more at ease instead of having this sound and camera interrogating them, right? So what I do is I just ask them, hey, what'd you have for breakfast? And usually they tell me, or if they didn't have breakfast, they talk about whether they had coffee or tea.
Well, that's just ridiculous.
But the point is that they're basically talking in a natural tone like they're gonna do on camera. And I've helped ease them into being at ease in front of the camera right at the beginning. It's usually a good idea to have the subject state their name and title for the record, especially if you're interviewing a lot of people and somebody else is going to be doing all the editing. But don't have them turn to the camera and do it as if they're being interrogated.
My name is Veronica Moscoso and I am a documentary filmmaker.
Instead, ask them that question right when you start the interview. It helps ease them into being more comfortable. Tell me your name and what you do.
My name is Veronica Moscoso and I am a documentary filmmaker.
It makes more sense to ask that question when you start the interview so they say it to you. It may sound small, but it helps ease them into being comfortable as you interview them once the camera starts rolling. Ask a simple question, you'll get a simple answer. Here's an example from a good friend, Veronica Moscoso, who's an award-winning documentarian. Where did you film your first documentary?
In Ecuador.
They're called closed or leading questions because they just lead to yes, no, or just simple information. And information in and of itself, an interview isn't really that useful. I mean, if it's needed, you could just have your narrator give it. What is the result that you want? Why are you interested in this information? More than likely, it's because there's some story around it that you want to record. Ask open questions that lead your subject to tell you the story around that issue that supports your project. Like, how did your first documentary come about?
So there was a very interesting story about this amazing proposal from the Ecuadorian government to the world to leave the oil reserves in this national park unexploited. So I had to go to the national park in the Ecuadorian Amazon and shoot there.
Other examples of open questions are, tell me what happened, or how would you explain this situation to people? They're more open versus specific and leading. There's a tip out there to ask your subject to include your question in their answer. And if you think about it, I mean, I guess that makes sense because you're not going to see or hear the interviewer, you're not going to hear their question. But there's some documentarians who really disagree with this. And one of those is Barry Hamp, the author of Making Documentary Films and Reality Videos. An awesome book, by the way, that I highly recommend. He says a few things about this. First off, that you're putting a burden to solve a problem of your edit on your subject that isn't their responsibility. It's now even harder for them to be at ease and to act naturally. They now have to think about how are they going to include this question in the answer, which if you think about it, and this is the second point, that's not a normal or natural thing. When we're having conversations with people or we're telling a story, we don't include the question in the answer.
No, you cannot have a number 24, nor a double portion of 37. This isn't the Chinese takeaway.
This is really an issue of context that you need to solve in your edit, not put that burden on your subject. Here's an example.
And basically, I asked him the questions that I thought he might answer. And sometimes you're surprised by the things they said. You're like, oh, wow, that's like an amazing thing that I just heard. And sometimes you're like, oh, really? Okay, I have to explore that.
Not sure what she was talking about, right? Okay, let's try this.
And basically, I asked him the questions that I thought he might answer. And sometimes you're surprised by the things they said. You're like, oh, wow, that's like an amazing thing that I just heard. And sometimes you're like, oh, really? Okay, I have to explore that, you know, and then they help you, that pre-interview helps you mold the story for later. But sometimes you pre-interview them and they sound terrible, you know, like they are not the type of person that is gonna look good on camera. They have no charm, they're really flat. Maybe they don't really have much to say, or what they say sounds very academic. And so the pre-interview helps you kind of like screen the person and see if this person is gonna be good.
Now, wasn't that more interesting? Now that you had context for what she was saying, you wanted to hear more of what she was going to say. Now, that solution, a title card, doesn't work for everyone or for every project, and it may not work for yours. But the point is, how can you, in your edit, supply the context that gives the viewer what they need to listen to, not an answer, but a story that's being conveyed by your subject. Other ways you could do this is to include other footage that somehow poses this query or gives context for what your subject is talking about. And that, by the way, covers our tip on how to prepare your subjects for the interview. And here's some other awesome tips from Veronica.
I need to have in my head what the story is going to be about. And after I know what the story is going to be about, and this might change because, you know, you report more, you research more, and then the story change. Maybe they tell you something that is like, wow, and then the story change. Doesn't matter. Still, you need to have like in your head what the story is about. And then kind of like you need to have like a draft of the story before you interview. And then you want to find people that will help you tell this story. So then you find these people that might help, and then you need to ask questions so they tell you what you need to know. So then you write down the questions. One thing that is a good practice if you're going to interview people is put yourself, like what we're doing right now, at the other side, you know, make someone interview you so you'll feel how nerve-wracking it is to be interviewed on camera. Yeah, most people are gonna get really nervous. And sometimes, even if the person is a great pre-interview, when they are on camera, they freeze and you can't use it. It's happened to me that I definitely cannot use what they're saying. And sometimes they try to sound so smart and then they get so confused and what they say, it makes no sense, So sometimes they get so nervous. So one thing that I do is like people get very self-conscious of the way they look, of course. So I understand that. So I tell them that they look great. You look great. That's the first thing that I said. Or you're sounding great. Let them know. And I also tell them that it's a conversation that we're having. And that if they make any mistake, if they want to start all over, they can start all over. Because they can, we can edit these things, Try to make it sound like you're talking to a 12-year-old. You don't need to sound super smart. You don't need to use big words. Just relax and let's have a conversation. And sometimes that works. Sometimes, depending on what you're doing, right? Like if a person is giving a testimonial and the person needs to talk about certain things that is kind of like from their memory, they have to remember. Sometimes what I've done is like I print in big pieces of paper like bullet points of what they have to talk about, but not so they don't have to memorize it, or sometimes it's just like even if they have to say something by memory, I said, you know what, just tell me, and it will sound better. Their explanation is more natural, more likable when they don't memorize it and when they just say it. So sometimes you interview someone, and if you don't want your voice to be there, and if you want just the person to talk,
right? Yeah.
Then you should hold on to your laughter or hold on to your comments.
Okay.
So you don't want to say
like what I'm not doing.
Like exactly what you're doing right now.
Sorry.
You don't want to add your voice because then you can't use what the person is saying. So maybe, let the person finish and then you hold on and then you laugh and then but sometimes, sometimes if you interview someone and it was funny and you laugh and you said something and you don't want to use your voice, but then, oh well, maybe you add some personality to the story, then you put your voice in. Yeah.
But bottom line, all of this advice boils down to one thing, and that is trust. I reached out to Amy Sewell. She's a writer, filmmaker, and nonprofit business manager who's well known for many things, including one of my favorite docs, Hot Ballroom. She mentioned to me that filmmakers can be intimidating to subjects because they have all of the power in how they look and are perceived. So trust is the bigger factor, she says. Trust comes from one genuine soul working to reveal another genuine soul on camera and having it work. I will say that the filmmaker must believe wholeheartedly in his or her mission, because to even interview an antagonist, you must somehow have some sympathy or empathy for his or her side of the story. The truth always lies in the middle, even when it doesn't. It does to someone. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to check out pullmyfocus.tv for the companion articles that go along with our videos. And don't forget that we are now producing more in-depth, deep dive video courses on various subjects. So don't forget to check out our courses page and to check out in the description whenever we have a new one, that's where we'll post it. And if we get coupon codes, if we're able to do that, we'll do that as well for our loyal viewers and subscribers who watch our videos all the way to the end. We thank